The 18 Strong Podcast, episode 136 with Stan Utley.
The number one thing that makes golf hard, particularly around the green, is we hold on to the end of the club that doesn't hit the ball.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzero.
Hello and welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast. Thank you for joining me this week where we have special guest Stan Utley. Stan is known as one of the masters of the short game, and ever since the time that he was playing professionally on the PGA Tour, had his one professional win, he has been known to be super slick and smooth around the greens, and eventually the guys on tour started asking him if he could help them with their short game. And so Stan eventually transitioned over to more of the teaching side of things as opposed to continuing to play professionally. And so in this episode, we're going to talk with Stan, first of all, what made him go with that decision to decide to help thousands and thousands of golfers on their own short game as opposed to continuing the pursuit of the PGA Tour. And then what are some of the philosophies that he has regarding the short game and how he works with players, and what are some of the biggest mistakes that he sees guys like us making on the course around the greens with their putter, and a couple basic tips and drills that you can try immediately to start working on your own game. This interview is especially exciting for me because Stan is a local Missourian. Obviously, I'm here in St. Louis, but he has influenced a lot of the people that I know that I have worked with personally. Some of my clients have gone to see Stan personally, and some of the instructors that I have connected with have all been influenced by Stan. So his book, The Art of the Short Game, was actually one of the first books that I ever read on the short game, chipping, pitching, the putter. And it was one that just kind of really clarified a few things for me. Not to say that I have anything mastered whatsoever, but it really helped me understand some of the different ways to utilize the club and let the club do the work. And Stan's going to talk about that in this interview. We even talk about his book a little bit. So it was really cool to connect with him, knowing that he's influenced some of the big teachers like Chris O'Connell, even a Jim Hardy has worked with Jim quite a bit. And I think Stan is actually going to be coming into St. Louis in the near future, which will be cool to hopefully maybe go see him in person. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this interview. Stan definitely gives us some actionable tips and things that you can do to improve your own game right away. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to thank one of our sponsors for today's show, which is the PGA Tour mobile app. Look, I've been there. I know that you want to access the leaderboard. You want to know what's going on Saturday and Sunday as the golfers are coming down the final stretches. But we don't always have time or access to be able to sit down and watch Saturday afternoon golf or Sunday afternoon golf. You've got a family. You might have kids. You've got places to go and people to see. So the PGA Tour has developed the coolest app that I've seen as far as keeping up to date. And obviously, it's the PGA Tour, so why would you go check out any other app? But it's got live video feeds. It's got updated scores. It's got course maps. It's got everything that you need in this one little easy-to-use app. So go to the App Store, whether you have an Android, iPhone, iPad, even you BlackBerry folks, you can get it on your BlackBerry. Just go to the App Store and look up the PGA Tour mobile app, and you can get everything that you need in this one little app to check everything that you need related to the PGA Tour, the web.com, the Champions Tour, all of them. So don't get stuck at that party, not being able to access or see what's going on the PGA Tour. You want to stay up to date. You want to know what's happening. Now it's super easy to do just from your phone. All right, let's jump into my interview with the man, Stan Utley. Stan Utley, welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, and thank you so much for taking the time today.
Jeff, thanks for inviting me in.
Absolutely. So I know that you're a Missouri guy, just like I am. Kind of grew up here. You grew up in southern Missouri, I believe.
I want to make it clear, I'm not just like you. I'm an old guy.
That's, you know what? I'm starting to feel like some days I'm the old guy. Working with some of these younger guys these days. But give me an idea of growing up here in Missouri. What was your childhood like? When did you start playing, and what was kind of your journey first to getting onto the tour? And then we'll talk a little bit later about your transition into teaching.
Well, as a really young person, I was born and raised for a while in Thayer, Missouri, which was a town of maybe not even 2,000 people. And I played a lot of basketball and a lot of baseball as a little bitty guy. And my dad kind of got hooked on golf when I was around 11. And when I was 12, we moved to a town of West Plains, Missouri, which they had a 9-hole course versus where I was. Thayer did not have a course at that time. So I was really introduced to golf about 11, but it was 12 years old when I had a place to go play in the summer with my buddies. And I loved, basketball the most, but played baseball and football. And, in the summertime I golfed. And I would say in some regards it come natural, and in some regards I had great instruction when I was young. And when I was 14, my dad said, "We'll see how good you are," and he took me to Columbia to play the state junior. And at 14 years old, kind of having never gotten out of my region, I finished second.
Wow.
And it was that time that my dad just realized that, he and my mom would make a commitment that if I wanted to pursue golf, they would help me with that. And the real kind of break in my life as far as golf is, Ken Lanning was a gentleman in Rolla, Missouri, and he's known as Mr. Junior Golf in the state of Missouri. I'm excited that now there's a fully accessible course down in Jefferson City named after him. And he's honored. He has passed away, but he began to mentor me as a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old, and he was my mentor forever and my main golf coach well into my pro career. So I feel like part of my progress was, one, I loved it. I worked hard at it. I wanted to be better, but I also had great guidance.
And when you were working with Ken, at what point was it something where you said, okay, I want to work towards being a professional golfer, or was it I want to play in college? What level of intensity did you have when you were working with him, and what kind of vision did you have for your future play?
So as a little boy, it was clear in my mind that I would play in the NBA. So I never had any career aspirations other than being a professional athlete. And it was very clear, at least by the age 15, that at the point you're not fast enough to guard the other guy, it doesn't matter how good you shoot, they don't let you play much. And so I got really focused on, if I wanted to be a pro, I better stick to golf. And so I never thought of anything other than that for a career.
And so age 15, you knew, okay, I'm gonna buckle down and I'm gonna do it. So let's fast forward us into kind of the college career, and then what it looked like transitioning through college, what your career was like there, and then getting onto the tour.
Being that I didn't have any kind of national exposure other than just a couple tournaments, I wasn't really recruited to play college golf, except for the coach at Missouri as I was coming up was Richard Poe, who's kind of legendary in Missouri and Missouri golf. And he was the pro at Country Club of Missouri there in Columbia. And he was a former Missouri player, and it was kind of his work that kept the program where it was. And so he would invite the good Missouri juniors to come play on the golf team. Like, he didn't really recruit out of the state. So I was just like several other guys in my class told, you can come be on the Missouri team. And I was given a little bit of a scholarship to start with, because I don't know that your viewer would know that a full team in NCAA college golf, there's only 4.5 scholarships available. So it doesn't ever how many kids you got on the team, 4.5 full rides is all they have to give out. So it's rare that anybody on the team would have a full ride, because they split it up amongst 8 or 10 guys. So when I got there, the team was just decent. But we ended up with some guys that were very self-motivated. And by the time I was a junior, we had a couple guys transfer in, and our team became very competitive. We always played a good schedule because Richard was friends with lots of big-time coaches. But my junior and senior year, the team finished 13th and 14th in the nation at NCAAs. I finished top 15 both years as an individual, and I ended up being second-team All-American. So kind of college golf ranks, they have 10 first-team guys, 10 second-team guys, and 10 third-team guys. So I was in the second group of 10 as far as how I was ranked as a college player both my junior and senior year. So that would put me in a category that might think I have a chance to be a pro.
So then when you then transitioned onto the tour, I know you played several different tours. You then, I want to kind of go to probably a pivotal moment, I would assume, in your career, 1984, when you ended up getting a sponsor's exemption into the Chattanooga Classic, I believe. Take us to that week, because from what I understand, you had a sponsor's exemption and ended up winning that tournament. What was that week like, and what kind of an impact did that have on you as a player and your career moving forward?
So I know that I'm gonna correct your timeline just because I know there's some information out there on the internet that's not accurate. But I finished my college career in May of '84 as far as a player. I played through the summer as an amateur, and my last amateur event was a U.S. amateur. I finished in the round of 16. I got beat. So soon after that, in the fall of '84, I turned professional, and I played a couple little local pro tournaments, and I went to tour school that year. But I played what you would consider the mini tours from 1985 until late summer 1989. So I went to tour school. I tried to get my card every year like, hundreds and hundreds of other young pros do. 1986, I lipped out a 30-footer on the last hole and missed getting my PGA Tour card by one. So I made it all the way through first stage, second stage, got to the finals, played 108 holes, and missed by a shot.
Oh, my gosh.
And at that point, you got nothing. Like, re-enter next fall.
Oh.
There wasn't a web.com tour. There was all or nothing. And I literally horseshoed on the last hole in 1986.
Oh.
So I played the Missouri Open, the Kansas Open, just mini tours all over the country. And mini tour means that we'd go put our $600 up entry fee, and if we got 100 of us to put $600 up, we kind of had a purse. I mean, that's the mini tour golf. If people don't know, that's what that means.
Right.
So all the purse money was our money. So the break that you're talking about was in the fall of 1988 or 1988. I Monday qualified for a tournament called Chattanooga Classic. So in 1989, I was granted an exemption into that field. So it's a PGA Tour event. Each event has 4 exemptions. Interestingly enough, John Daly got one of those exemptions into that tournament. And so leading up to that tournament, I had worked for several months with a sports psychologist for the first time. His name's Rick McGuire, and he was the track coach for 25 years at least at University of Missouri. Very famous sports psychologist in the track and field world. But he wanted me to meet his friend David Cook, who was more, they were kind of counterparts in the industry, but David knew golf better. So in July of '89, I went to the Kansas Open and I met David Cook. And he taught me what I would refer to as a mental routine or a process of thought that would help me do the same thought pattern every shot. And I would say the greatest purpose of that is it eliminates distraction or your mind going in places that is not beneficial. So I learned this mental process. I played the Kansas Open. I played pretty good. The next week I played the Missouri Open and won. And then the following week I happened to be in this tour event. And so I'm working on this new mental thought process. I'm coming off some success. When the week shook out, teeing off on Sunday afternoon, kind of late, I was paired 4 back, and John Daly was leading the tournament. So the 2 guys at the top of the leaderboard were 2 exemptions. And there was a good field in that tournament. Kenny Perry was playing, and there was a lot of tour players in the event. Now, I'll be honest, it was opposite the World Series of golf. So the top 30 players in the world were not at this event. That was good scheduling for me.
Yeah, no kidding.
And when I made the turn and I went to the 10th tee on the Sunday round, I noticed that there was 8 or 9 of us tied for the lead. So it was bunched up. John had hit it out of bounds a couple times on the front. He had come back to the field. I had made a few birdies on the front. And when I walked up on 17 tee, Ray Stewart, a Canadian, had finished the round, and I was 1 back. and I birdied 17 and 18 and won by a shot.
Wow.
And all of a sudden I went from 5 years of mini tour golf to, wow, I get to go play the PGA Tour next week for the rest of this year and 2 more years guaranteed. And, oh, by the way, I'm in the winners category. Like, I'm getting paired with Nick Price and Nick Faldo. So, and to this day, I'm a PGA Tour winner member. If I go to a tour event, I can park in the player parking lot. That's pretty cool at the Phoenix Open because it's a crowded place. I can get in. It's a nice benefit.
That is awesome. Was it tough to then, like, mentally transition into that where before, like you said, 5 years on the mini tours, now all of a sudden I'm a PGA Tour winner and I have access to all these things? How was that transition? Was that a struggle?
I wouldn't call it a struggle. I was married at the time. My wife was a huge piece of, we were feeling like a team, and we felt like this was what we planned on. So it how it came to be was all in an instant, but it was still exactly the plan. It just wasn't how we saw it was going to happen. And we learned as we went along, and at the end of the day, no matter what level you're playing at, it's whacking a round ball and getting it in a cup. And that part, if you allow it to stay the same, should stay the same.
Right. I love it. So I was doing a little research on you, and obviously I know that you are now full-blown teaching. Are you playing on the Champions Tour? Are you still playing a little bit?
Interestingly enough, I've been age eligible since 2012, as I like to say. So I'm 55 now. And my first year in 2012, I played, I think, 6 events, maybe 5. And then the following 3 years, I only played 1 event a year. Last year in 16, I played 6 events. So I can't really tell you I've quit, and I sure am not chasing it.
Right.
But I still tee it up occasionally, and it's fun to challenge my game. I think it's a learning experience to relate to the average golfer that, I have to deal with the same pressure that they might think they feel they're unique to, because my goals are maybe on a success rate higher than theirs sometimes, but it's still can I compete? Can I perform? So I think staying in the competitive mode somewhat is a great benefit to me as a teacher. And I think the other thing as it relates to still playing and teaching is I'm still capable of hitting the shots. And I forget sometimes giving a lesson that it might really benefit my student if he saw me hit the shot. And I do that sometimes. Yesterday I gave a playing lesson. So I played all the way around as my student played around, and he could see how I managed shots. I could see what he did on the golf course versus just on the range, or at the chipping green, and it was beneficial to both of us.
I would think that the playing lessons are so important, and it gives such a different perspective that as opposed to, like you said, just being out on the range, hitting balls, working on technique, working on shots. Is that something that you do quite a bit with your players? I'm
going to say more infrequent than it should be, because the hard part is I teach golf at Greyhawk Golf Club predominantly here in Arizona, and it's a public daily fee course. So it's cranking, and, if I go for a playing lesson, my student needs to buy a green fee. And so it'd be different if I was teaching at a private club, and that's kind of not where I'm at the moment. So it's some, but it could be more for sure. It would be beneficial.
Sure. Speaking of your teaching, it sounds like you've always kind of known that you had the knack for teaching and always had a desire to help the other golfer and kind of teach people different shots. Even when you were playing on tour, I heard a story of you kind of working with one of your competitors on the putting green while your wife and kids were waiting for you. And so what was it that you knew you wanted to be a teacher? When did you decide, like, hey, this might really be my path moving forward?
Well, I would say a couple things. As when you are pursuing professional golf, probably the most popular question to ask the young pro is, so what are you going to do when it doesn't work? I mean, very few people think it's going to work out for you. And so I would say, well, I did not see myself behind the counter as the golf pro, but I saw myself as possibly helping people. So I would say that was always in the back of my mind. Mr. Lanning, my mentor, I would say he blessed that idea as much as anybody, because he really said, you're going to be a really good player. Someday you'll be a great teacher. Like, he always told me that. And I don't know why. Maybe he just saw my attitude toward helping people and my ability to kind of desire to learn might help me be a good coach. But that was always in there. And I think it came out simply as the idea that in your profession, you're talking to your peers, and you guys are always learning from each other. If you one of your peers, understands a new exercise, then you're not going to say it's bad. You're going to try to embrace it and figure it out. Well, my peers recognized my chipping and putting and my bunker play was unique and special. So they were always asking me what I thought, and I was asking them how to hit it better. I had my aspects that I wasn't as good at. So we were just helping each other as peers more than anything else. And my dad the game did not come very natural for him. So I feel like, people say, how long you been teaching? I'm like, well, when I was 13, I was way better than my dad, and I told him what I thought. So, I think if you're telling somebody what you think about what they're doing, you're teaching them, well, no matter what you call it.
Sure.
So anyway, it was just kind of a natural thing to share what you thought was going on. And then, your story about what my wife and the kids were waiting on me, my wife really kind of laid down the law at that moment and said, look, we don't mind waiting if you're practicing, but if you're teaching the guy you need to beat tomorrow, he has to pay. And it was really at that point when I told people, I need to charge you. So when I said that, people that were not my close friends began to ask me for help. Like as a player, there were people who wanted my advice but didn't want to intrude on my time. But all of a sudden, when they could pay me, so all of a sudden I got busier teaching when I was still competing. And I would say I was almost full-time teaching in 2002, but I still played a fairly full schedule through 2004 and part of 2005. So I was doing both for quite a while.
And then was there a moment that kind of propelled your teaching career after that, where you decided, okay, this is it, full-blown, I'm going to go teach? And I know you worked with quite a few players, Jay Haas being one. I'd love to hear some stories of you and Jay.
So for sure, the moment that changed my life was I was at Jay Haas's brother-in-law's house, who was my close friend Dillard Pruitt. And Dillard played the tour a long time and now is still a PGA Tour official. And we were just having a cookout, and Jay was over, and it was during the BMWweb.com event in Greenville, South Carolina, and Jay kind of gave me the what's up, and I said, well, I'm still playing, and I'm helping guys with their short game. And he was like, oh, give me a putting lesson. So we went in the backyard, and I think he might have made a stroke with a 6-iron. I don't even think we had a putter. And I gave him a tip, and a few days later he called me and said he needed more information. And at that point in his career, he had just lost his tour card as far as not finishing in the top 125 for the first time ever. He was kind of mid 40-ish, maybe 46. And he went on from there with what I would call a little bit of information for me, and possibly became the best putter in the world. And at 47, 8, 9, 50-ish, he was top 30 player on the PGA Tour and made the Ryder Cup team. So his success really launched my career, and it drove many other tour players to come and see what I had to say. And there came a time, probably in 2004-ish, maybe 2005, that a friend of mine that is local here in Arizona, he used to own a big executive search firm. He kind of sat me down at lunch one day and he said, where do you rank as a tour player? And I was like, well, I might be on the list somewhere, maybe 1,200 or something. And he said, where do you think you rank as a putting coach? And I said, I don't know. I might be in the top 10 there. And he was like, you think you can figure out which job to focus on? And that's kind of when I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't play so much.
That's funny. Kind of realizing what the priority was and where the bigger future might be. And then
That's exactly right.
You went on and worked with some pretty big name guys. I know right around that time. I know who were some of the guys that you worked with then right after that?
Well, one of the guys that I've enjoyed the most with having a relationship and a friendship was Paul McGinley came for lessons, and he's just an incredible person, and he wanted to work on his wedge play and his putting, and over time I ended up spending a lot of time with Darren Clark. Brant Jobe is a guy that was a fun person that came and took lessons, and the year we worked, his teacher Mike McGettrick brought Brant, and they just really needed to clean up his putting, and he finished top 30 on the money list that year. Unfortunately, Brant had a couple odd injuries that kind of slowed him down, and now he's playing great on the Champions Tour. But I spent a bunch of time with Henrik Stenson. I spent about a year with on Sergio Garcia's team. So it was fun that Rocco Mediate asked me to kind of help him transition from long putter to short putter, and he went on and almost won the U.S. Open with a short putter. Some guy, I can't remember, beat him in a playoff at the U.S. Open. It's like Coach McGuire used to have this saying. He would say, "What is the difference between winning and losing?" And his answer would always be scheduling. And I'm like, if Tiger Woods had withdrawn that U.S. Open, Rocco would have won. It was bad scheduling for Rocco that Tiger kept playing.
He just didn't schedule as well as you did in your PGA tournament.
That's right. I was lucky that one week I scheduled good.
That's right.
But anyway, it's an honor to work with those tour players. But truthfully, from my perspective, anybody who's trying to get better at golf, if I can help them do that, it's a complete rush. And I work with complete beginner kids, ladies. Probably the most satisfying is it's not unusual that I'll have a 50-year-old 6 handicap guy that's almost quit playing because he can't chip. He's lost it. And oftentimes he thinks it's mental, and I would say that it becomes mental, but it was a bad technique that drove him into disaster around the green. And if I can give him logic and the way to actually change his technique for the positive, then he can begin to overcome the mental aspect as well. And giving somebody hope of getting better is incredible.
Well, I think that you're talking about that 6 handicap guy, that you're probably speaking right to the heart of the audience here at the 18 Strong podcast. So what would you say are some of the biggest issues or barriers that you might see in a player like that come to you? What are some of the things that you see us doing wrong, practicing, approaching our round, especially around the short game, with you being the master of the short game?
I would say that the student is oftentimes applying poor information. And he's either done that intuitively or actually somebody has coached him into doing it wrong. It's funny how I can take some people and they're like, well, when I get through with them, they're like, well, that's what I used to do when I was a kid and I was awesome. And I'm like, and it worked, right? Like they forgot. And I don't know what led them into quit doing it the easy way, but the number one thing that makes golf hard, particularly around the green, is we hold on to the end of the club that doesn't hit the ball. And if you use your arms to accelerate the grip, chipping is impossible. It's going to be miserable. So one of the things that I share with everybody is that I decided I would go over and talk to the Ping engineers. And so I asked Eric over at Ping, he's got a PhD in engineering. I said, if I swing my driver club head and my club head's going 100 miles an hour when I hit the ball, I said, how fast is the top of the grip is the top of the grip traveling? So, Jeff, you're an expert in this field. You got any guesses?
No, I don't. Slower than the head.
Slower than the head. So what do you think? 75%, 50%, 25%?
Let's say 50%.
So people don't really think of that. So the math says it's 16 miles an hour. That's the average.
Wow.
So I went over there and I did some wedge testing. And when my wedge, I was hitting a little 65, 70-yard wedge shot. My wedge club head was swinging 50 miles an hour. The top of my grip was traveling 7. So people mess up short game because they make the grip go about 80% of the club head speed. Mm-hmm. So I see the biggest problem with people around the greens is they're accelerating the grip possibly 50 to 70% faster than the club head, as fast as the club head when they hit the ball. And probably the best way I could get you to understand this is if anybody's ever seen somebody double hit one, mm-hmm. if you think about how in the world did the guy just double hit it, that seems impossible. What he does is it's through impact, he's accelerating the grip so fast that the club head's hardly got any speed at all. Then he releases his wrist after the club head hits the ball, and the club head speeds up and catches the ball. Because let's say the first time he hit the ball, the club head's going 8 miles an hour off the club face, but then he throws the club head 20 miles an hour when he flips his wrist. Mm-hmm. So basically, I help people understand how to get in sequence so that the handles go in the right speed, so the club head can go the right speed. And all of a sudden, they're capable and they understand. And there's technique involved in how to get them to find what I call proper sequence. You got lots of different size parts moving in different size speeds. But the hard part is if you throw the handle, that does not necessarily make the club head go faster.
So I know it's kind of hard to explain technique on the air here, and I know that's not really easy to see. What are some things that you could kind of impart on us as far as just the way we practice around the greens, aside from some of the technique type stuff? But what are some of the favorite maybe drills, either putting or short game stuff, that you would recommend, or what are some of the ways that, again, you're seeing people like me, guys that are listening to the show, that we're doing it wrong, and what would you suggest for us? Let's take a few seconds to thank our other featured sponsor of today's episode. Okay, it's no secret that you want to hit a ball further. I want to hit a ball further. The biggest thing that we want to do is most likely beat our buddies when we're playing golf on the weekend. And that's just it. That's why we love this game. The problem is it can be tough to hit a ball further. You either have to swing faster or you have to make better contact. And unfortunately, you've probably tried every gadget under the sun. You've probably tried all kinds of different exercises to increase your swing speed to no avail. Thankfully, the guys at Super Speed Golf have figured this out, and they know that it shouldn't be this hard to help you hit a ball farther. So they've come up with an incredible overspeed training system and some great easy-to-use and easy-to-follow protocols that have helped thousands of golfers, whether that be the amateur golfer or the professional golfer, to swing faster and hit a ball further. If you haven't had a chance to check out their overspeed system, go to superspeedgolf.com and you can find what they look like. You can find out how to use them. You can check out their training protocols, get on their email list, which they then let you access all of their training protocols. But this is the best system that I have found to increase swing speed in golfers of all ages, juniors up to the professional level. So if you're tired of your buddies giving you trouble for hitting it past you all the time and you want to see the look on their faces when your ball sails past them 10, 20 yards, go to superspeedgolf.com, use the code 18STRONG to get your discount and unleash your speed. All right, let's get back to Stan.
I'm going to give you a putting question, and then I'll give you a drill. So my question is, when a good putter is putting, when does maximum acceleration happen during the through swing of the putt? Is it at the beginning of the downswing, halfway down at the ball, or just past impact? When is maximum acceleration?
I would guess probably down at the ball.
Okay. And probably half of the people listening are going to say, well, it's just past impact.
I almost said that. But the truth
of the matter, and I would have really ridiculed you had you said that. Because it makes no sense at all to accelerate after the ball has left the building. So the next question is, do the best putters have long, medium, or short follow-throughs? So Jason Day, how long is his follow-through? short. Tiger Woods, short. Jack Nicklaus, short. Dave Stockton, short. Ben Crenshaw, really short. So I don't think our industry realizes, there's always exceptions. You could always throw Lauren Roberts out. He's an outlier. He has a longer stroke. I wouldn't change it, but I wouldn't teach it. So the answer to the first question is maximum acceleration for a good putter is at the beginning of the downswing. So Mr. Lanning always told me, he said, putt with dead strength. So if you dreamed of with just your finger and your thumb, and you swing it back with your right hand and you drop the club, and it would be a pendulum stroke. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you swing the pendulum free and you drop it from the beginning of the downswing, it accelerates when you turn loose of it. And it would swing through, and the follow-through would match the backswing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, but what if you hit a putt? The ball would cause the follow-through to be short.
Right.
So I teach people to have a pendulum stroke that allows the dead weight of the club to do the energy. And when that happens, you don't need a long follow-through. You've already delivered all the energy you need to the back of the ball. So here's my drill. If you ever think about you're going to go tap the balls off the green, you chipped them out there and you're going to go tap them and move them off the green. Basically, you just pick the club up with your wrist and you just drop the club down on the ball with your wrist. You would never shove your arm forward and push them off the green. I don't think a good athlete would ever do it like that. But I see people in their stroke, they take it back real short, and then they surge through the ball because they think they're supposed to accelerate, and their follow-through is way longer than the backswing. Well, that's not really what great putters do. So there's technique involved in how do you let it swing back free big enough and fast enough that the dead weight or the dead strength of the stroke delivers the ball the right distance. So if you just would go use your wrist more to take it back, and I got to be careful here. I'm not asking people to be wristy putters, but they might need to feel they have some joints at the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder joints that needs a little grease to allow the club to swing back. And the first time they do it, if they do it correctly, they're going to say, this is so wristy, and I'm going to show them a video, and it doesn't look wristy at all. Okay, so that goes back to I teach sequence. I help people move the parts in the right order so the energy and the speed on the club head swing is at the club head end, not at the grip end or not in their shoulders. I'm fascinated. If people say they shoulder putt, I say, well, how talented are your shoulders? And how far are they from the end that matters? You got a 6-foot guy putting with his shoulders. His shoulders are 5.5 feet away from the putter head. I'm like, you're going to wave something 5 feet away trying to move the putter head 10 inches back and 8 inches through? I think that's bad math. So simply, if you go tap balls off the green with your wrist, don't try to use your wrist forward. Just pick it up and let the dead weight of the club drop on the ball. In this drill, I would have them kind of hit down on it. Now, I'm not saying that's how we're going to putt, but it's a feeling you can get that all of a sudden it's like, well, this is way less effort. Well, that's because all the effort is going on the end that matters, which is the club head end, not the top and not you. The same thing can apply to chipping. If you allow the club head to swing back and you move your body properly, that dead weight will follow the club on the ball. And, in your field and in the golf field, you train this every day, and the fancy catchphrase is, and you probably know more about this than I do, but everybody's studying vertical ground force pressure. That's words that you know.
Right.
But our student doesn't know that. So they think they're supposed to keep their head down, and every tour player is leaping off the ground. Well, the leaping off the ground or the pushing up off the ground with your legs and your torso, that helps the club head go down. So they're topping it thinking they're supposed to keep their head down, but it's because they're pulling the grip forward. They can't reach the ground because when they shove the handle forward, they create an angle that didn't exist to begin with. So the club head's actually closer to them than when it started. But you teach a person to use leverage off the turf and they raise up. Well, when they raise up, the club head goes and gets the ball. It goes down. When you pull your hands, the club head's actually backing up. It's not going down. So, I teach how to use the hands and the wrist correctly. I'm not saying I'm teaching wristy. I'm just teaching how to use the levers. But in chipping, you have to use the ground and you have to stand up and pivot to let the levers go down instead of go up.
I read your book, The Art of the Short Game, and
you're playing better now, aren't you?
You know what? I especially played better right after I read the book, and then I haven't. I have 3 kids and a full-time job where I didn't get to practice like I'd like to.
I meant after my speech I just gave. Like, you see it in your head, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even over a podcast, you can see it in your head because everybody does the same thing. You never see a chipper that's bad that doesn't dip his right shoulder and his right knee. He has to dip because the grip's so far forward at impact, he can't reach the ground if he doesn't dip. So he fats and eats skulls because he can't time the dip. Watch Steve Stricker. Watch any tour player. They don't dip. They stand up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, who are a couple guys on tour that you would recommend us watching to really kind of pay attention to their sequence and the way that they move the club and how they position their body?
I think Ricky Fowler is swinging it freely as anybody. I think if you could ever see Jeff Ogilvy hit a pitch, it's just incredible. Henrik Stenson is amazing. Henrik Stenson does not accelerate the handle. Watch Henrik Stenson hit bunker shots. It's incredible. His coach Pete Cowan is amazing at short game. But all of them do the same thing in my vision. But the hard part is our industry is the golf industry. We don't all see it the same. So the person that's come to me that has the ball back in their stance and they aim left and they have their hands forward, they're paralyzed. Mm-hmm. Because when you aim left, you're telling your brain you have to hit a push block scoop. Because you're not aimed at the hole. You got to block it to go where you're looking versus where you're aimed. So I don't want to hit any push block scoop. So I don't ever aim left when I chip. That makes no sense to me at all.
Right.
And then if you move the ball back, I ask everybody do you have more room for error if you land your club steeply or shallow when you land your wedge in the turf and into the ball?
Shallow.
So shallow has way more room for error because the club is traveling along the ground longer. So if you put the ball back in your stance, you've just created a steep angle of attack. So Mr. Lanning told me to stand square and play the ball middle to forward. Well, that was genius. That gave me a huge advantage over most of the other kids because that's not what the average teacher in our industry tells people to do. And it's very frustrating to me to have a student come and his hands forward, so that's steep. The ball back, that's steep. His aim to the left. Now he's got to lean his body to the right, which leaning your body to the right is shallow. So I do the opposite. I lean my body to the left. I create steepness with my body, and all my club swings is making the club head swing into the ball shallow. Now, that's how to make it easy.
I know that you've kind of collaborated with the guys at the Orange Whip, which we love the Orange Whip. But I got to see your new product, the wedge, and I think they have a putter as well, correct? And can you give us an idea of how these tools can help us do what you're trying to teach us how to do?
So if the idea with the Orange Whip wedge and the Orange Whip putter is that if you exaggerate how soft the shaft is, if you pull the handle, the shaft backloads even more. So the guy that can't chip, it exaggerates his mistake, and then it helps him, when he gets it right, it helps him exaggerate correctness, which causes him to make the change faster. And if you can imagine, I've got the Orange Whip, I've got a wedge in front of me, and I kind of turn my body back, and then I turn my body forward, but right at impact, my hands stop. So if you stop your hands, that soft shaft will fly the head past your hands.
Mm-hmm.
So if I ask you, which direction does the shaft bend at impact? Is it bowed toward the target or bowed away from the target if you're hitting a 7-iron?
At impact?
At impact.
It's going from being bowed away towards bowing towards the target.
At impact, the shaft is bowed away from the target.
Okay.
Because if the shaft doesn't kick forward, you're not using the shaft. If you still have the shaft bowed forward at impact, the shaft hasn't kicked yet.
Gotcha.
So you're not taking advantage. You're not taking advantage of the, I like to call it the rod tip. If anybody viewing as a fly fisherman, you slam the brakes on your arm and the handle of your rod to get the rod tip to fly the fly from loaded to unloaded and flies forward. If you keep driving your arm forward, the rod tip stays bent backwards. Well, that's why everybody chips bad. So the orange whip wedge allows me to teach people to actually stop the top of the grip and feel the shaft unload the head on the ball. And most people that are bad, they've never felt that. And it's like, they just look at me and they said, well, that's so easy. And I'm like, it is for me, and it would be for you if you did it correctly. But they don't know because they're told to keep the hands driving forward and keep your hands in front of the club head. Well, that's accelerating the end that doesn't hit it. If you're driving the grip forward, it's not doing the club head much good.
Right.
It's dragging it, but it's not letting it whip and speed up, and that's when it gets easy. And the putter does the same thing. The quieter I keep the top of the grip, the more the shaft loads and unloads, and all the energy then moves to the club head. People lag putt so good with the orange whip putter, it's crazy. Everybody's like, can I use this in my real golf? Because it gives them an exaggerated feeling of the end of the club delivering the energy versus them trying to surge the grip and deliver the energy. Right. So both products, all the orange whip clubs or all the orange whip training aids, they help the student feel the shaft load and unload. And you're not efficient until you learn to unload the shaft correctly in every shot.
It was definitely a different feel when I tried it out at the PGA show. I didn't get a chance to try the putter, but I definitely tried the wedge and took a couple repetitions to really get the feeling of kind of letting it go, like you said, not trying to force it with the hands. And I can remember getting the opportunity to watch Chris O'Connell work on some short game stuff, and he attributes a lot of what they were teaching to you, learning from you, and talking about that shallow path and letting the hands, letting the handle stop and letting the club head go by. So it was really kind of an eye-opening experience there. All right, Stan, I know that your time is valuable. You have a lot of teaching to do today. I want to ask you a couple last quick questions before we get you off the phone. One that I ask every person that comes on the show, and that is, are you more of a Caddyshack or Happy Gilmore fan?
Wow. If I said I'm watching the movies?
Yes. Which one do you prefer?
Probably Happy Gilmore.
Wow. I don't know that I expected that one. I like it.
I'm about turning it loose.
Yeah. Well, that's
I
Happy
really
Gilmore.
am. I think when you understand your technique, you don't have to control it anymore. And when we quit controlling our games and we let them go correctly, it gets easier.
All right. If golf was more like baseball or like boxing, where when you come up to the tee box, you had a song playing in the background, what would Stan Utley's song be?
I'm bad with remembering music and titles. I will say that I had a day where I sang a song, and I shot 62, and it was River of Dreams by Billy Joel. So I know that song worked for me once.
Well, then you can't argue with it. You got to keep going with that one.
That's right. And I would say as golfers and as people in life, we kind of have our beat to life. Like an example would be if you were pacing off, just walking calmly, how long does it take for your next step to land? That would kind of be your beat to life. And my guess is the beat to that song fit my life good that day because I was making birdies.
All right, if you had a chance to play 18 holes of golf with anyone in the world, and this could be somebody past, present, future, doesn't matter. Who would it be, and where would you choose to play?
That's a tough question because you can't beat going and playing with your son. And my son Jake is 19 years old, and I don't want to make everybody completely jealous, but he and I and a couple other friends from Missouri, Don Walsworth and his son Tripp and I, we had this day last week.
Wow!
And on Wednesday morning, I don't know when you're going to air this, but we teed off at 7:42 at Pebble Beach, and we played a pristine day at Pebble Beach. And I don't know how it gets better than that, and I'd go back and do it again if I had one more round to play.
It doesn't sound like it gets much better than that. All right, Stan, last question of the day. What has you most excited about what you're doing right now, the teaching, and all of the different tools, opportunities that you have moving forward from this day on?
Every day I get better at my craft. And what has me most excited today is I had a huge breakthrough about a month ago. And a friend of mine named Rob Akins, who teaches great golf in Memphis, Tennessee, he and I talk all the time. And I have lots of mentors. Jim Hardy, you mentioned, is a huge mentor of mine. Mike Adams, E.A. Tischler. There's lots of great instructors out there, and we collaborate all the time. But about a month ago, Rob and I were talking, and our visit made me a better teacher. And for me to be able to deliver the information in a way that my students get better quicker, it's a rush. And I can't wait to go help the next person every day and every hour. So there's where I'm at.
I love it. I love hearing that. Where's the best place that they can go and find out more about you, your teaching, your lessons? I know you have a big online library. Where's the best place to find you and even maybe follow you on social media?
So my website is just stanutley.com. I think all my social media platforms are just Stan Utley. And, it's easy for people to email through my website and book a lesson. The video library is kind of a work in process. We're trying to get it just right before we launch it, but we're getting close. And that'll give people a chance in the near future to go on and pay a subscription and just see me demonstrate some of the things that we're talking about here today. And I think it does good for people to see me in action, and it lets them kind of take it to the course with their phone or their iPad and kind of try to copy what the moves I'm talking about and making. So stanutley.com is the primary place to reach me.
Perfect. Stan, I can't thank you enough for taking the time today. I know that I got a ton out of reading your book. What's the one book that you would say, if you had to pick all of your books, what's the one that you would recommend somebody read first?
That's a tough question because the ones that are easiest to come by, I would say the Short Game book is a really well-written book that I think people can understand. The irony of life is that my fourth book, it's called The Art of the Swing. I probably did the best job of telling all the story, and somehow or another I made the mistake of putting swing on the cover of a book that a Short Game guy wrote, and it's no longer published.
Really?
So I have a few hundred copies that we're going to offer on my website shortly that you can buy directly from my website. But I don't have many of those. But out there in the world of where you find a book on the internet, there aren't many of those, and they're expensive. But I did a good job with that book, but easily accessible. The Short Game book, which has the red cover, I delivered the information pretty clear in that book.
Excellent. Well, there you go. That's the one that I read, which I thought was just fantastic. So I highly recommend it from my end as well. Stan, once again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and I love all the work that you're doing, and just keep on doing it.
Okay, I hope you visit me in Arizona, or I plan to be in Missouri some this summer as well.
Well, if you're coming to Missouri, you absolutely let me know, and we'll hopefully get on the link somewhere. Maybe we'll head over to Boone Valley and see if we can convince them to let us on.
We'll have to work on that.
I know. All right. Thanks, Stan. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks for joining us on the 18 Strong podcast this week. If you want any more information on Stan or the show notes to this episode, just look up episode number 136 or look up Stan Utley at 18strong.com. You can find everything we talked about over there. Again, don't forget to check out the PGA Tour mobile app to get all of your scores, check the leaderboard, get all your videos for everything that's going on the PGAtour.com. And if you're ready to unleash your speed and gain some extra distance off the tee box, check out the Superspeed Golf system at superspeedgolf.com and use the code 18strong. We have another great episode next week. Stay tuned, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.